The Ninja Turtles have had their name and likeness slapped on everything from ice cream to soap to COVID masks. But this isn't that story. This is the story of the greatest artistic license agreement the Turtles ever made. This is the story of their musical coming out of their shells.
We're coming out up from under the street. Lord, we're ready to rock. There will be no retreat. We're coming out of our shells, yeah. Out of our shells. We're coming out of our shells. We're coming out of our shells.
Co-creator Bob Bejan.
My writing partner, Godfrey Nelson, and I had spent the previous 3 years working as jingle writers and industrial show writers, having written a musical together kind of in the mid-'80s. And the pact we made with each other as we were getting all this commercial work was we were going to do as much of it as we could because we were, it was great, just great experience. And that was back in the day where, you could still write jingles for a living and make a great living at it. And so the deal we made with each other was, hey, we were going to do this until we built a 24-track studio in New York City that was ours, that we could do whatever we wanted, and then we'd go back to making, entertainment projects. And we got that done in about 2.5 years. It was kind of an amazing run. And in the winter of 1988, 89, it was time to start looking for something to do that was a new project. And the interesting thing is we have a bunch of married friends that were having kids and, complaining about going to Disney on Ice and that kind of thing. And we're like, it'd be cool to write a cool kids show that adults would have fun at as well.
Co-creator Godfrey Nelson.
And we had all these ideas, but we didn't have a platform. So a friend of ours, who actually ended up directing the Coming Out of Our Shells, he brought up the idea of the Ninja Turtles. And at the time, this was in the fall of '89, like maybe September or so. And we had started sketching up. We had a recording studio in our office in Manhattan, and we started sketching up some ideas of different songs. And this guy said to us, "How about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?" And we were like, "What?" We had no idea who they were.
Bob Bejan.
I was a comic book reader at the time, and a friend of mine had given me a Xerox copy of the first comic novel that Eastman and Laird had done. That hadn't really been published yet, but kind of was, you could get a copy. They were around, and my partner and I read it, and it was like, wow, this would be a freaking awesome show. And we just kind of literally one of those things where you stay up at night and kind of go, oh, what would be the outline? And we came up with the outline for the show, and we wrote 3 or 4 songs, and I wrote like a 20-page treatment. And then literally we just we knew that those guys lived in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I literally called information and got their number and called them and said, hey, we have this idea. Can we come up and see you? We'd love to run it by you. And
Godfrey Nelson.
I think it was probably sometime at the very beginning I was trying to remember, either at the end of '89 or the beginning of 1990. So we put together a pitch, which we had done a lot of pitches because that's kind of like what our business was about. And we put together like 5 or 6 songs, and all of which ended up on the album. And our whole concept of what we wanted to do with the Turtles. And at the time, it was very different actually than what ended up being the Coming Out of Our Shells tour. Originally, it was just, we really wanted to tour it like a rock band, these guys had been down in the sewer, chopping wood, as they say.
Well, it all started a long time ago, back in the pet shop.
Oh, Mike, stop goofing around. He wants to know about the music.
No, duh! Just chill out, Raph. See, okay, Raph and I were waiting for this pizza to be delivered, see, and...
Yeah, and I was just banging on some sewer pipes when all of a sudden we realized we were making music.
Oh, man, it was so bodacious!
With kind of like a, garage band type vibe, but really kind of like rock and, hard edge, more like No Treaties, like that song No Treaties.
He walks in the door, and out go the lights.
more like edgy rock than it ended up being more of a mix of lots of different styles. And so we went up there, and Eastman and Laird, we had lunch with them in a private room in a restaurant, and we pitched them, and they loved it.
It was interesting because Kevin was really into it. I'd get an envelope at the office in New York, and it'd be like 5 sketches of him going like, this is what the costumes could look like, this. And we, of course, we took a lot of inspiration from that as we worked with Landmark Entertainment, to kind of build the suits and everything, which was cool, because I think they enjoyed it in the sense of it being different. Definitely, I think Kevin more than Peter for all the obvious reasons. We were very different than toys and cartoons and the movie, and so I think the idea of being around rock and roll was cool to them at some level. And they were like, okay, you're going to hear from our lawyer. And this guy, Mickey Hyman, who was their lawyer at the time, called like a couple weeks later and said, okay, you guys are in. If you want it, here's the deal. And they gave us just an enormous package of rights for a remarkably little amount of money. It was everything we had at the time, being who we were in our careers, but it was really not a lot.
But they were really behind us. And if it hadn't been for them being behind us, Bob and I never would have been able to get that license. There's no way. I'm not exactly sure, but I believe that it was like $250,000 that we had to put up front just to get the rights to the license. That was money that we wouldn't see again, That was what I'm not. It could have been more, but I think that's what it was, which is a lot of money, especially for 2 young guys who had no money. By the time we really got our act together and we had the whole show put together and with all the songs and the real full pitch put together to go to corporate sponsors and record companies and that kind of thing, the Turtle movie was just about to come out, and it was getting a lot of hype. I think it came out in March of 1990. I don't remember exactly, but I believe it came out in March, and we were pitching before that to record companies, and we could not get a record deal. They thought we were crazy. They didn't know who the Ninja Turtles were, and we maybe pitched to maybe half a dozen, maybe more record companies in February and the beginning of March. Well, by the end of March, they were calling us back, because of the movie, because I think the movie, it grossed like $300 million or some crazy amount of money.
And what it enabled was us to get a producing partner, this guy, Steve Lieber, and then get virtually instantaneous sponsorship by a pizza company, right? Because it was just an incredibly hot thing. So we literally wrote letters to the CEOs of Domino's, Pizza Hut, and Little Caesars and said, hey, we're coming to see you, here's the deal we're kind of offering. You know what I mean? Pizza Power was the song we played for them at the meeting, man. Like that was the one. And Pizza Hut, this guy David Novak, who was running Pizza Hut marketing at the time, kind of really understood. And they agreed to sponsor the tour. They bought 3 million albums, up front before we'd even recorded it. We only had demos at the time, and the buying of those albums paid for the entire production. The creation of we recorded the album, we staged the show, we built the costume, we did everything on the sale of those 3 million records. And then Pizza Hut agreed to do, at the time, an enormous advertising campaign, $25 million, and make a national commercial. And that's what launched the tour at Radio City. And, it was like, there weren't that many sponsorship deals back then, period. But to do that, which now when you think about it, was like this incredible multimedia, multi-channel marketing plan. And those guys at Pizza Hut bought into it. It was an extraordinary thing. And it launched the tour, and the tour, went for 2.5 years, and we had 3 companies touring the world.
it's hard to explain. A lot. It kind of exploded as it was going along. You know, the budget for the set like tripled. You know, things like that. I mean, it was like because they became so big. You know, in that period of time that we were working on the show. From when we started to when it actually opened, it was like completely different thing, you know, as far as where the Turtles were at. They just exploded that year, and I think they did they did over $1 billion in 1990. Yeah, I mean, think about it. That's 30 years ago, man. It's a lot of money, and it really changed right up to the last minute. I mean, coming out of our shells was done literally like days before it went to mastering. It was like, you know, but that's how Bob and I always worked too. We always, you know, worked. I mean, you think about it, we were pitching the license in January and it opened at Radio City in September. So, I mean, that's fast. It was definitely a high energy situation. So, you know, we did some interviews for K-Rock in New York, and we did some interviews when we were Bob and I were working on the music in character, and I think that's how it started was, you know, Bob was Michelangelo, and
Well, it was just because like my voice, and I, you know, I'm a Southern California kid, and I grew up at the beach, and so like I have a natural affinity for surfer language, and so it made sense.
and Bob's like, oh, you got to be the rat, man, you got to be the rat, and because of my voice and so forth. And so I did for the interview. That's what happened because we were really on the spot, you know. And then it just, you know, we did those vocals in Los Angeles, and I did the rat. That's, you know, it ended up, you know, the song that we wrote. I did the demo. I did the, you know, vocal on the demo, and that's what ended up being the final vocal.
Standing in water that looks like glass. World of blue is what I see. It's smooth and flat inside my hand. I just wanna ride it as I set it free. I'm standing. Keep on, skipping stones on a smooth blue pane of glass. I'm skipping stones.
You know, it was this idea of trying to capture the essence of Splinter, you know, the Zen master, and, you know, so much of Asian or, you know, Buddhist literature talks about, you know, spreading of your vibration, and they use that illusion a lot of a stone skipping on still water, and the way every action you take has an effect on everything else. And so that was really, I mean, honestly, that's where it came from. And it's funny because I think when we wrote that song, it was like, oh, this is a song, you know, we would have written for anyone or ourselves to sing, even as it ended up being a good song for Splinter. The voice on the recording is actually my partner's voice, and he, you know, that's the way he sings. And you know, I mean, I think like it's Tom Waits. His voice reminds me a lot of Tom Waits. But I think, the arrangement and the production of it, to me, feels very much like Brian Ferry and, you know, kind of the Avalon period of Brian Ferry.
Keith Forsey did a fantastic job on that song. We recorded that song in New York, and then when we went out to LA and worked with Keith, we worked with him on like 3 or 4 songs, and he really took that song to a whole other place. And I redid the vocal out there. And when he did that, I mean, he just really, I mean, of all the songs he worked on, to me, that was the arrangement he did was just fantastic. But that was all recorded out there, that particular arrangement. Like this is the kind of way we were working. It was like, hey man, we got to come up with a title. It's like, and that we're fooling around with some music and stuff, and Bob's like singing, or we're both singing in a way, and it just kind of happened. And we said, oh well, that could be the title song, and so we were really shooting from the hip, and we literally walked into the studio and recorded the song, and it just so happened that the singer who sang that song, he sang a bunch of stuff. He happened to be there, so we just went ahead and did the whole track, and it was really at the last minute. And that the whole name, everything came out of that. Some of the tracks are all me, so, and then just sweetening here and there. Like No Treaties is just me in the studio, and I think the one guitar player we brought in to put on that lead guitar, which is phenomenal. I still to this day listen to that track. It was kind of a mix of this, that, and the other. We had 3 songs that we wanted to have more of like a funk feel. So we brought in an arranger in New York that I had worked with, and Bob and I had worked with on commercial work, and a guy named Donald Blackman who did a lot of R&B and funk stuff, like big time stuff. And we brought him in, did arrangements on like Walk Straight and a couple of other of the songs, And then we did another 3 songs with Keith Forsey, but we recorded all of the songs completely done, and then went into the studio and replaced things and reworked everything in the studio. But we did a lot of stuff in our own studio, and then we re-recorded it.
The harmonies and coming out of their shells and stuff like that, Count on Us and everything like that. We were listening to Journey records and, kind of REO Speed, all those big kind of multi-part harmony rock, anthem rock bands. If you listen to that record, there are a lot of styles in it, and everything from funk to R&B. Both my writing partner and I have pretty eclectic tastes in music, and so we were just trying to kind of find things that suited the characters well, and felt contemporary and not kiddie rock, and felt more authentically of the genres that we were trying to kind of pay tribute to. It was really about kind of saying, okay, how do you create an evening that kind of that allows us to call upon kind of all the elements of what the Turtles were, right? They're superheroes, so they got to do something amazing. They have an incredibly well-defined villain, so there's got to be this dynamic between them. That's really completely stolen from Peter Pan, right? This whole thing about when Tinkerbell dies in Peter Pan, and Peter Pan says to the audience, you have to clap. That's the only way to bring her back to life. I mean, that whole thing about the music thing, and, the only way to overcome Shredder is for the audience not to be afraid and to sing with the Turtles, and that's what destroys him, or, gets the music back. That just felt like a good, I don't know, the theater guy in me goes, oh, that's a good moment in the confines of a theater and the dynamics that occur between an audience and a show. It's like that felt like a natural, okay, you could get that done every day and people would get it and hook into it. You know what I mean?
Now word up, I got a story to tell. It starts way back when we were coming out of our shells. Back then we were little swimming in our bowl, but something happened when we fell down that manhole. Don't have to tell you what you already know. You should remember that we all have to grow.
The final dress rehearsal with all the full pyro and everything in Radio City Music Hall, and the first time we take the Turtles into the toaster lifts that pull them out of the sewer, and the manhole covers fly off, and there's fireworks. And it's the first time we do it. The fire marshal's in there, and all the management of Radio City's there, and we set off the fireworks, and the guys come out, and two of them get stuck because they still have the shells on their back, and we haven't yet discovered that it's impossible for them to do the whole show with the shells on their back. But also the pyro catches fire, lights a fire on one of the manhole covers, and they pull it up into the ceiling, and it almost sets the fringe of the 100-year-old act curtain at Radio City on fire. And, I'm standing in the back, and the fire marshal's screaming, and the owners of Radio City are screaming, and it's like, that was a tense moment or two. So there's tons of stories like that. Any kind of production has them, but there were some amazing ups and downs for sure. And we spent a lot of time with the movie guys as we were starting to build the suits for the road. And of course, you want to do 100% matching. And, the original suits and the out-of-town tryouts and the first early rehearsals, we had full shells and all this kind of stuff. And there's this infamous performance night when we're still in previews at Radio City, shell night after hell night, in a fraternity kind of thing. And, we're literally halfway through the second act, Donatello and the actor playing Michelangelo literally pass out in the middle of one of these songs because the weight and the sweat and the heat generated by the shells was just too much, and both of them were overcome, which was not pretty. And that led to kind of the alterations and the kind of ultimately what we ended up touring with, which was something that the performers could dance full out in and still sustain all the way through. But we had a ton of trouble. The final dress rehearsal with all the full pyro and everything in Radio City Music Hall, and the first time we take the turtles into the toaster lifts that pull them out of the sewer, and the manhole covers fly off, and there's fireworks. And it's the first time we do it. The fire marshal's in there, and all the management of Radio City's there, and we set off the fireworks, and the guys come out, and two of them get stuck because they still have the shells on their back, and we haven't yet discovered that it's impossible for them to do the whole show with the shells on their back. But also the pyro catches fire, lights a fire on one of the manhole covers, and they pull it up into the ceiling, and it almost sets the fringe of the 100-year-old act curtain at Radio City on fire. And, we're standing in the back, and the fire marshal's screaming, and the owners of Radio City are screaming, and it's like, that was a tense moment or two. So there's tons of stories like that. Any kind of production has them, but there were some amazing ups and downs for sure. And I think, look, you can argue about how successful we were, but I think, to a great degree, we created some magic for some people. When you're standing in the dugout of the New York Yankees at a playoff game, singing the national anthem, standing next to Don Mattingly, and a turtle's out there on the mound, lip syncing to what you're singing into the microphone in the dugout, and the whole crowd goes absolutely freaking nuts. That's pretty heady stuff.
Give it up for John, Mike, Raph, and Leo, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles!
When it really started to roll and a lot more people got involved and a lot more financial risk got involved, a lot of opinions started hitting the plate, so to speak, that's all I can say. It was a little crazy because it just happened. It was a little too fast, for me. And that was one of the reasons why I just, I kind of overloaded on it. But I was very involved, and then I backed off. I totally backed off. I had personal things going on in my life, and it was just the timing was right,
I mean, we sold 1 million tickets. I mean, that's the better way to think about it. I mean, that's a lot, when you think about the venues we were playing and the number of days we were playing and all that kind of thing. That's a lot of tickets to sell. We sold about 6 million albums. We did, it's wild. The fact that they're still as big as they are now, it's a tribute to the property and the underlying intellectual property of the Turtles, right? It's one of those things that resonates with lots of people for lots of different reasons. But the stuff that we did, it was an incredible ride. I mean, it was exceptionally successful. We definitely had swag, you know what I mean? And people would gather.
We weren't even thinking about the money, to be honest with you. We were thinking about creating something that people didn't have, that wasn't happening,
To me, almost more than anything else, and really the whole the whole Turtles property kind of holds up to what I'm about to say is that, if you can see what it is that you want to go for and you can really focus on that, you can kind of make anything happen. Because like when I think about what we did then, and just kind of on gumption, really, and not knowing any better that it couldn't be done. The stuff that we were able to kind of make happen and be a part of is just extraordinary. And even as you think about like what drove Eastman and Laird to write the Turtles in the first place, same kind of thing, right? They were rejected by so many of their stories had been rejected by the traditional comic book companies at the time. They wrote the Turtles kind of in response to every criticism that they were given. It's the Turtles property and the universe is basically everything that at the time comic books said you couldn't do. 4 heroes instead of just a threesome or a duo, that kind of thing. Like all of it just was flying in the face of all the criticism that they got. And they just went, we're going to do this and we're going to commit to it and make it and believe in it. And, I think in a very real way, Godfrey Nelson, my writing partner, and I, got the same kind of experience out of that.
Yeah, I think it's the second best-selling children's album ever. I still, to this day, I'll get if someone knows that I wrote the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle music, you wouldn't believe the response people, guys that are like in their late 30s now that were like turtle freaks, they're like, oh, awesome, it's crazy, and hence the reason why we've done some licensing, and they really got the people that were into it were really into the music and the fact that it was not kids' music, It's funny because, I have friends at Nickelodeon that are, at high levels at Nickelodeon. And, we went to them a few years ago because we wanted to do another tour. And they weren't interested in doing any live shows. But now we're getting the word, we're hearing, through the grapevine that there might be an interest in doing a live show again.
It had a profound effect on our lives and certainly, what we've done afterwards and everything. It was amazing to be a part of it, be close to them.
Out of the shells, we're coming out of the shells. When there's music inside of you, you know that someday it's got to come through. That's why we're here and we're telling you true. We're coming out of our shells, yeah. You hear the rhythm and you're moving your feet. Ain't nothing like a song with a beat. We're coming out up from under the street. Lord, we're ready to rock. There will be no retreat. We're coming out of our shells, yeah. Out of our shells, we're coming out of our shells, we're coming out of our shells. Oh, just once we got started, we knew that we scored. Learning the music and finding the chords. We just kept practicing, we stayed underground. 'Cause singing in the sewer is a wonderful sound. It's a wonderful sound. We're coming out of our shells. Lord, we're coming out of our shells. We're coming out of our shells. 'Cause when there's music inside of you, you know that one day it's got to come through. That's why we're here and we're telling you true. We're coming out of our shells. Lord, we're coming out of our shells. Yeah, we're coming out of our shells. Lord, we're coming out of our shells.
Look, the proceeds of the Turtles, I got into writing software in the Turtles because the heads were controlled by Futaba remote controls. And we had this desire to make the show not feel like a tracked show. So we put on the road a 32-track, a multi-track recorder. So every night the mixer mixed the show live. All the parts were separate. So it felt more alive, and it worked pretty well. But then we had to find a way to get SMPTE, the code that gets generated on that, to control the futabas to broadcast to the heads on stage so that the lips would move in synchronous orbit, right? And at the time, there was nothing that could do that. And so we had to create an application, a show control application that would read SMPTE time code from the recording and then broadcast it to the futabas, and then futabas broadcast it to the heads. And so that really was the first software project I ever worked on. And in the aftermath of the Turtles, like most entrepreneurs, I invested a lot of the money that I made into ideas. And I got involved with virtual reality very, very early, a company called Virtual Worlds Entertainment in like 1991. And that led to an idea for interactive motion pictures. And you may or may not have heard of it. It was called Interfilm before the internet, but it was made for theaters in like multiplexes, pistol grips on every seat. And the audience basically did a choose their own adventure assembly of 3 hours of filmed material to create these interactive movies. And it got a lot of press, and we got noticed by Microsoft in the early 90s. And we built 150 theaters and made 5 of these interactive movies. And then I got recruited to go to Warner Brothers and start Warner Brothers Interactive. And then from there, continued to communicate and work with Microsoft in that capacity. And then I got recruited to come to Microsoft the first time in 1995 to start MSN. And I was one of the founding executives of the Microsoft network, and then started the ad business there, and then went back to being an entrepreneur, and then 3.5 years and started an agency and sold it and built it, blah, blah, blah. And then 3.5 years ago, I came back to Microsoft to run global events for the company. And it's just it's a fantastic job. And so I'm having a great time. But that's the short story of how I got here.